In the beginning, before nations, before laws, before even the concept of time as we know it had meaning, there was God. And in his infinite wisdom, he created everything: the heavens and the earth, the oceans and the skies, the beasts of the field and the fish of the sea, and finally the crown of his creation, humanity. It all unfolded in 6 days, perfect, orderly, and full of life. But then something curious happens. On the 7th day, God stops. Not out of exhaustion, for the Almighty does not grow weary. No, this rest was deliberate. In Genesis 2:2-3, it says, "And on the 7th day, God ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the 7th day from all his work which he had made. And God blessed the 7th day and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work which God created and made." Now think about this for a moment. The 7th day isn't like the others. God didn't just stop creating. He blessed this day, set it apart as something different, something holy. In doing so, he introduced a divine rhythm into the fabric of the universe itself. 6 days to work, 1 day to rest. But this rest was far more than a pause. It was a sacred invitation. Imagine Adam and Eve, fresh in their innocence, walking through the pristine beauty of Eden. Every tree, every river, every living creature spoke of God's creativity and love. And as they lived in this paradise, the 7th day, the Sabbath, became their first full day, a day dedicated to communion with their Creator. No labor, no distractions, just pure, undisturbed time with God. What does it mean that God blessed the 7th day? In Scripture, when God blesses something, he infuses it with special significance. To bless is to give favor, to set something apart for a divine purpose. And the Bible tells us he didn't just bless the Sabbath, he sanctified it. That word, sanctify, means to make holy, to set it apart from the ordinary. So from the very dawn of time, God embedded the Sabbath into the very DNA of creation as a holy, distinct time, not for the sake of rules, but for relationship. This day, this Sabbath, is not an afterthought. It is not a suggestion. It is woven into the order of creation itself. God could have stopped on the 6th day, content with his masterpiece. But he didn't. He added one more layer. One more day that wasn't about creating life, but about enjoying it with his creation. Now let's pause and ask, why? Why would God do this? The answer is as profound as it is simple. God desired for humanity to remember. Not just to rest from labor, but to remember who he is. The creator of all, the source of all life. The Sabbath was designed to point us back week after week to the God who spoke the world into existence, to remind us that we are not the creators of our own lives. We are his. And this holy rest reflects his original design, a design rooted not in busy achievement, but in trust, relationship, and reverence. In the Sabbath, we find a connection to Eden itself. It's a time to remember the world as it was meant to be, a place of beauty and harmony, a place where creation and Creator were in perfect communion. The Sabbath gives us a glimpse, a taste of what life was like before sin fractured the world, before humanity turned its back on its Maker. You see, the Sabbath is not just a day off, it's a day to reconnect with the divine. It's about recognizing that in 6 days we may toil, but on the 7th, we are reminded that it is not our work that sustains us. It is God who sustains us. He created us not just for labor, but for relationship with him. The Sabbath, from its very origins, is an invitation back to the heart of that relationship. A day where the noise of the world fades and the voice of God can be heard clearly. And let's not miss the point that this day was set apart for everyone. Not just for Adam and Eve, not just for a chosen group, but for all of humanity. In Mark 2:27, Jesus himself says, "The Sabbath was made for man, and not man for the Sabbath." This wasn't a gift exclusive to any one people. It was for all of mankind, for all time. A day meant to bring peace, reflection, and restoration, not just for the body, but for the soul. So, as we look at the Sabbath in the context of creation, we realize it's not merely an ancient tradition. It's part of God's original design. It's a thread woven into the fabric of existence, meant to realign us with our Creator every 7 days, reminding us of His authority, His power, and His love. And the beauty of this day? It's not just about what we cease from, our work, our daily struggles. It's about what we step into. A sacred time, a holy communion, a chance to once again remember that the one who made the heavens and the earth, who formed us in His image, longs for us to rest in Him. But why does it matter so much? Why is this day so different? Well, the answer lies not in the rest itself, but in whom we rest in. The Sabbath was designed to keep us grounded in the truth that God is our Creator, and we are His creation. It's a day where the world slows down, and in the quietness, we can hear the gentle voice of God calling us back to Eden, calling us back to Himself. And this is just the beginning of the story. We've seen how the Sabbath was embedded in the heart of creation itself. But what happens next? We'll see that the Sabbath doesn't just belong to the ancient past. It continues as a living commandment, a sign of something far deeper and more powerful. Let's keep exploring. It's interesting, isn't it? Among the 10 commandments, there's only one that begins with the word remember. This isn't accidental. It's intentional. God knew how easily we forget what's most important, how quickly we lose sight of the things that restore us. In a world that moves so fast, the Sabbath commandment stands as a beacon, calling us to slow down, to step back from the chaos, and to reconnect with God, with others, and with ourselves. But what is it that we're meant to remember? What's so significant about this day that God Himself calls us to honor it, to keep it holy? In Exodus 28-11, God gives us a direct invitation, a holy invitation to rest. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work, but the 7th day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work. Now, this isn't just a pause from physical labor. It's much more than a chance to catch up on sleep or to avoid our to-do lists. No, the Sabbath is a divinely orchestrated break from the daily grind, a sacred rhythm woven into the fabric of creation itself. You see, this commandment reaches far back into the history of the world. It's a reminder of God's act of creation. Genesis tells us that after 6 days of speaking the universe into existence, God rested on the 7th day. Not because He was weary, for the Creator of heaven and earth never tires. Instead, He rested to set an example. He blessed and sanctified this day, Genesis 2:2-3, making it holy, distinct from the other 6. And here's the key. He invites us to join Him in that rest. But why do we need to rest? Why do we need this weekly pause? We live in a world that glorifies productivity, where worth is often measured by how much we accomplish. The Sabbath reminds us that our value isn't found in what we do, but in who we are, children of God, created in His image, invited to rest in His presence. It's as if God is saying, stop, breathe, remember who you belong to, remember where your time, your life, your very breath comes from. There's a spiritual renewal that comes when we honor the Sabbath. It's like hitting the reset button on our souls. God knew that without this rhythm of work and rest, we would burn out, not just physically, but spiritually. The Sabbath gives us a chance to step out of the noise and into God's presence, to hear His voice more clearly, to reflect on His goodness, and to experience His peace. Think about it. The Creator of the universe set aside time just for you, to rest with Him. Isn't that incredible? And here's something we often miss. The Sabbath is not just a break for our bodies, but a sanctuary in time, a holy space where we can reconnect with the One who made us. It's a gift, not a burden. Jesus said, "The Sabbath was made for man, and not man for the Sabbath." Mark 2:27. It wasn't designed to restrict us, but to free us from the endless pursuit of more work, more achievement, more stress. So many of us live in this constant state of busyness, chasing after things that ultimately leave us empty. The Sabbath calls us to stop chasing, to trust that God will provide, even if we set aside our work for one day. It's a reminder that He is Lord over our time, our work, and our lives. Have you ever noticed how easy it is to lose sight of what really matters? We get so caught up in the daily grind that we forget to nurture our relationships with God, with our loved ones, even with ourselves. The Sabbath is an opportunity to reclaim that time, to slow down and focus on what's truly important. It's a time for family, a time for worship, a time to reflect on God's goodness. And most importantly, it's a time to rest in the knowledge that we are loved by the Creator. Let me put it this way. Imagine a world without any pause, where every day is the same as the last, an endless loop of tasks and obligations. No time to reflect, no time to rest. That's the world many of us live in today, a world that desperately needs the Sabbath. The Sabbath doesn't just restore our energy, it restores our priorities. It reorders our lives in a way that aligns with God's rhythm. We were not designed to live in constant motion. Even machines need rest. How much more do our hearts and souls need this sacred pause? So when God says, "Remember the Sabbath day," He's not giving us a command to follow blindly. He's offering us a gift, a holy invitation to step into His presence and find rest. And in that rest, we discover something beautiful. Life doesn't have to be a relentless pursuit of work and achievement. We are called to something deeper, something richer. The Sabbath reminds us that we are more than our jobs, more than our responsibilities. It's a day to realign our lives with God's purpose, to remember that He is the source of all we have and all we are. It's a day to be still and know that He is God. Psalm 46:10. Imagine for a moment. God gives us His Sabbath not just as a day of rest, but as a sign that He is the one who sanctifies us, who sets us apart, who makes us holy. Ezekiel 20:12 tells us plainly, "Moreover also I gave them my Sabbaths, to be a sign between me and them, that they might know that I am the Lord that sanctify them." The Sabbath, then, is more than a relic of ancient tradition. It's more than a weekly routine. It's a living, divine symbol, a reminder of God's sanctifying work in our lives. Let's pause here for a moment. In our fast-paced modern lives, we often look for markers of success or spiritual growth. We set goals, chase ambitions, and sometimes, even in our spiritual walk, we look for proof that God is working within us. But what if God already gave us such a marker, a weekly sign that He is molding us, shaping us, refining us into His likeness? This is what the Sabbath is. It's like a spiritual appointment with God. Every seventh day, He invites us to slow down, to stop the relentless grind, and step into His presence for renewal. It's a day that's set apart, not just for physical rest, but for spiritual restoration. And through this restoration, He sanctifies us. That word, sanctify, it's not just about being clean or pure. It's about being set apart for a holy purpose. Think of it this way. Just as God set apart the Sabbath at the very beginning of time, making it holy, He also desires to set us apart, making us holy for His purpose. The Sabbath then becomes this powerful connection point between God's creation and His ongoing work in us. When we keep the Sabbath, we aren't just observing a day. We're entering into a process of sanctification, where God is working on our hearts, aligning us with His will. But let's get practical for a moment. What does this sanctification look like? It's not always immediate, and it's rarely dramatic. It's like a potter shaping clay on a wheel, slow, deliberate, sometimes requiring pressure, but always with a clear design in mind. Each Sabbath is like the potter's hands, steadying the clay, molding it. Over time, the shape begins to take form. Over time, we begin to reflect the character of the one shaping us. You see, sanctification is not just about our actions changing. It's about our hearts changing. And the Sabbath offers us the perfect space for this transformation. It strips away distractions, pulls us away from the noise of daily life, and gives us time to reflect, to pray, to commune with God. And it's in this communion that true growth happens. In Matthew 11:28, Jesus says, "Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." That rest is not just physical, it's spiritual. It's rest for our souls. And every Sabbath, we are invited to experience that rest in a special way. A rest that heals, a rest that sanctifies, a rest that transforms. And this transformation, this process of becoming more like God, is what the Sabbath is all about. It's not just about taking a break, it's about becoming the person God intends you to be, aligning your life with His will. And each Sabbath gives us that space to pause and let God work within us. It's as if He's saying, "Let me handle this. Let me shape you, guide you, restore you." And here's the key. God doesn't force this sanctification on us. He offers it. It's an invitation, a weekly reminder that God is not finished with us yet. He's still working, still shaping, still perfecting. And as we keep the Sabbath, we're reminded that our spiritual journey is not one we walk alone. God is walking with us, and every seventh day, He pulls us closer, making us holy in His presence. Now, why does this matter? Too often, we treat the Sabbath like a day to just recharge our bodies, to catch up on rest or unwind. But we overlook the deeper spiritual purpose. It's about restoration, yes, but not just of our physical energy. It's the restoration of our hearts, our minds, our souls. It's about letting God renew us, shape us, and align us with His will. When we keep the Sabbath in the way God intended, we're opening ourselves up to His sanctifying power. It's a day for spiritual growth, for realigning our priorities, for stepping back from the world and focusing fully on God. The world today is full of distractions, full of noise that pulls us away from God's voice. But the Sabbath quiets that noise. It gives us room to listen, to reflect, to be changed. Each Sabbath is an opportunity to grow, to let God's sanctifying hand guide us just a little closer to who we were created to be. So, as we consider the Sabbath as a sign of sanctification, let's remember, it's not just about resting, it's about letting God work on us. Every Sabbath is a reminder that He is still shaping us, that His work in us is not yet complete. And as long as we keep this sacred appointment with Him, He will continue to sanctify us, setting us apart for His divine purpose. The Sabbath. Many of us hear that word and think of rules, regulations, and restrictions. For centuries, it's been seen as a day burdened with legalism. But when Jesus walked the earth, He turned that notion on its head. You see, the Sabbath was never meant to be a weight on people's shoulders. It was meant to be a gift, a day of healing, renewal, and connection. Jesus makes this clear in the New Testament. In Mark 2:27-28, He says, "The Sabbath was made for man, and not man for the Sabbath. Therefore the Son of Man is Lord also of the Sabbath. Now think about that. The Sabbath was made for us. It's not a day designed to crush us with burdensome laws, but to lift us, to restore us, body and soul. Jesus knew that the people of his day had lost sight of this. By the time he arrived on the scene, the Sabbath had been buried under layers of man-made rules. Religious leaders had taken something God intended for joy and made it a symbol of rigid obedience. They had forgotten the heart behind the Sabbath, and that's where Jesus steps in. One of the most powerful things Jesus did was heal on the Sabbath, and he did it deliberately. Time and time again, we find him restoring people's health, both physically and spiritually, on this day. In Luke 13, there's the story of the woman who had been crippled for 18 long years, bent over, unable to straighten herself. Imagine the physical pain, yes, but also the emotional toll, years of suffering, isolation, and hopelessness. And then she meets Jesus. Without hesitation, he heals her on the Sabbath. She stands upright, completely restored. But what happens? The religious leaders are outraged. They say, "There are 6 days in which men ought to work. In them, therefore, come and be healed, and not on the Sabbath day." Luke 13:14. Can you hear it? The hardness in their voices? They were so obsessed with the law that they missed the miracle unfolding right in front of them. And Jesus' response? "Thou hypocrite! Doth not each one of you on the Sabbath loose his ox or his ass from the stall and lead him away to watering? And ought not this woman, being a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan hath bound, lo, these 18 years, be loosed from this bond on the Sabbath day?" Luke 13:15-16. Jesus cuts right to the heart of the matter. The Sabbath is a day for loosing bonds, not binding people in more rules. It's a day for freedom, restoration, and healing. Let's step back for a moment and think about what Jesus was really doing. He was taking a day that had become a symbol of oppression and reminding the people that it was actually a symbol of liberation. Isn't that how God always works? He takes what's broken and restores it. And that's the beauty of the Sabbath. It's not just about physical healing. It's about the whole person, body, mind, and spirit. It's about coming to God with our burdens, our weariness, and finding rest in Him. In Matthew 11:28, Jesus gives that beautiful invitation, "Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Matthew 11:28. This isn't just any kind of rest. It's Sabbath rest. It's a rest that heals the soul, that lifts us out of our struggles and places us in God's arms. This is what Jesus wanted to restore to the Sabbath, a day for humanity to reconnect with God, to find healing from the chaos of life. Jesus' ministry showed that the Sabbath was meant for our benefit. He healed the sick, comforted the brokenhearted, and even fed the hungry, all on the Sabbath. Why? Because the Sabbath is a time for recreation. Just as God rested on the 7th day after creating the world, the Sabbath is our chance to experience recreation in our lives. It's a day to be renewed, refreshed, and made whole again. But here's something even deeper. The Sabbath is not just a physical rest day. It's a day where God heals the broken parts of our spirit. Jesus is the Lord of the Sabbath, and in Him we find that ultimate rest and renewal. When we pause from the busyness of life, we can hear His voice more clearly, feel His presence more intimately, and allow His healing power to flow into our lives. How many of us are walking around wounded, emotionally exhausted, and spiritually drained? The Sabbath is God's remedy. It's a day designed to realign our hearts with His, to remind us that we don't have to carry our burdens alone. We live in a world that never stops. It's always go, go, go. We've lost the art of stillness. But God says, "Come, rest with me, be still, and know that I am God. Psalm 46:10. And that is the heartbeat of the Sabbath. Jesus knew what the Sabbath was really for. It's not about following a set of rules to earn God's favor. It's about entering into a relationship with Him, allowing Him to restore us in ways that only He can. When Jesus healed on the Sabbath, He was showing us that God's greatest desire is for us to be whole, physically, emotionally, and spiritually whole. Think with me for a moment. A world where time doesn't seem to matter the way it does now. No more rushing from one thing to the next. No more weariness from life's struggles. No more pain or suffering. In that world, the entire creation is at rest. Not just a pause in the busyness of life, but a true, deep, eternal peace. This is the future God promises His people, a rest that mirrors the Sabbath we experience now, but perfected. The Bible gives us a glimpse of that future rest in the book of Isaiah. There we read these words: "For as the new heavens and the new earth which I will make shall remain before me, saith the Lord, so shall your seed and your name remain. And it shall come to pass that from one new moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another, shall all flesh come to worship before me, saith the Lord." Isaiah 66:22-23. This passage tells us something remarkable. The Sabbath isn't just for now. It's not just a relic of the past, a commandment given at Sinai. It's something eternal. It stretches far beyond our present world into the very fabric of eternity itself. In the new heavens and the new earth, from one Sabbath to another, all flesh, that's every nation, tribe, and people, will come before God to worship. Imagine that, an entire universe united in worship, gathered together on the day God has always set apart as holy. The Sabbath becomes a constant rhythm of life in this new creation, a time when all creation aligns in perfect harmony with the Creator. You see, the Sabbath has always been more than just a day off. It's a sign, a symbol of something bigger than ourselves. In Exodus, the Sabbath pointed us back to creation, a reminder that God is the creator of all things and that everything in the world is His handiwork. But here in Isaiah, it points us forward to the time when all things will be restored. The Sabbath looks ahead to that final rest, when the curse of sin is lifted, when death and sorrow are no more, when God's people dwell with Him forever. But let's pause for a moment, because this isn't just about some distant future. The beauty of the Sabbath is that it's both a present reality and a future promise. Each week, as we enter into the Sabbath, we're given a taste of that eternal rest. It's like a preview, a weekly reminder that no matter how difficult or tiring life becomes, this world is not the end of the story. There's something better coming, something worth hoping for. Just like God rested on the seventh day after creation, we are invited to rest, trusting in His power to sustain us not just today, but forever. Now imagine what that eternal rest might look like. The book of Revelation paints a vivid picture of the new heavens and the new earth, a place where God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away. Revelation 21:4. The Sabbath points us to this reality, a time when all that's broken will be made new. This is why the Sabbath matters so much. It's not just about taking a break from work. It's about stepping into God's rest, a rest that reflects His power, His grace, and His ultimate plan for humanity. It's a foretaste of what's to come, a glimpse of that eternal peace where the chaos of this world is replaced with the harmony of heaven. When we keep the Sabbath now, we're practicing for that future kingdom. We're learning how to rest in God's presence, to trust in His timing, and to find our identity not in what we do, but in who He is. Think of it like this. If we rush through the Sabbath, if we ignore the gift it offers us, we miss out on that weekly reminder of eternity. We lose sight of the fact that God's rest is more than just physical. It's spiritual, emotional, and eternal. The Sabbath trains us to slow down, to refocus, to realign our lives with the rhythms of heaven. And as we wait for that eternal rest, the Sabbath gives us hope. It reminds us that no matter what struggles we face, no matter how chaotic or uncertain life becomes, God is still in control. His rest is still available to us both now and in the future. Just as He created the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh, He is working now to bring about a new creation, a world where we too will find our eternal rest with Him. So what does this mean for you? Every time you experience the Sabbath, remember that you are participating in something eternal. You're practicing for that future kingdom where we will worship God together, in perfect peace, forever. And that, my friend, is why the Sabbath is not just a day for today. It's a day that points us to eternity. The question is, are you living in that rest now? Because God's promise of eternal peace is already being offered, one Sabbath at a time. As we reach the end of our journey exploring the unique gift of the Sabbath, let's take a moment to reflect on what we've discovered together. What did you find surprising about the Sabbath? Did you learn something new today that reshapes your understanding of this sacred day? Perhaps you've realized that it's not merely a break from the week's hustle, but an invitation into a deeper relationship with God. Now, if you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss our future explorations into these powerful truths. Each video is an opportunity to delve deeper into the Scriptures, uncovering the layers of meaning that God has woven into His Word. And I'd love to hear your questions. What else about the Sabbath are you curious about? Is there a specific aspect you'd like us to explore together? Let's keep the conversation going in the comments. But before we close, let's take a moment to pray and invite God's presence into this sacred reflection. Dear God, thank you for the incredible gift of the Sabbath, a day set apart from the very beginning of time to remind us of your love, power, and desire to be close to us. As we've journeyed through the Scriptures, we've seen how this day was not just a command, but an invitation to experience your rest and renewal. Help us to understand its true meaning and to embrace the peace that you offer. May this special day draw us closer to you and prepare us for the ultimate rest in your kingdom. In Jesus' name, amen.